I have on the line with me this morning former Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis and leader of the People's Labour Party, the PLP, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris. Good morning, Dr. Harris. How are you?
Good morning, Madam Mcphail. I am happy to have the opportunity to speak with you. I am well at this time.
Now, you are the immediate former Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, and since the August 5th elections, we have been hearing from the current St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party a lot of allegations in terms of your leadership. To be frank, there have been allegations in terms of corruption within the Team Unity administration. Now, one of the talking points that we've heard a lot about during your administration and since is the Citizenship by Investment program. The Citizenship by Investment program was started in St. Kitts and Nevis. It has been a major revenue earner for the Federation. We have also heard talk about its ending shortly because of the quote-unquote race to the bottom. There is a perception that under the Team Unity administration, the government had been engaging in underselling citizenships. What would you say to that?
I would say the whole story is a lie, and it's typical of the dishonest leadership that we now have in the country. It is easy for one to make an allegation and more difficult to prove. And you would have thought with over 3 months, 4 months have passed, August, September, October, November, December, the government would at least be able to bring one scintilla of evidence to the fore. And there is none because there is none to be found. It is important to recognize that our CBI program, for example, is the platinum brand in the world, in the region, the most sought after. Any program that has been abused would not have that kind of demand and that kind of interest. It is important to bear in mind that when we took over, when I became Prime Minister in 2015, the CBI had its reputation damaged. Two of our most important partners in the hemisphere, the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world, and Canada, the second most important one in the Americas, had in fact already distanced themselves and sanctioned us because they felt that our CBI program was indeed abused. It had become the preference for persons who wanted to avoid international criminal agencies, etc. The evidence of that is real, and I draw your attention to what was issued in May, the 28th of May, 2014, by the United States Treasury Department, the department that deals with financial crime. And that advisory, FIN 2014-8004, is easily available just by Googling. And what is the subject? The abuse of the Citizenship by Investment program, sponsored by the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Paragraphs 1, 3, and 4, very helpful for the analysis. This is the evidence that have come from an independent and credible source about what the CBI program was. From 2015 to 2022, thank God, we have never had one complaint from the U.S. Treasury Department regarding our CBI program, because we pledged and we succeeded in reforming the program, clear it of all the abuses of the past. Linked to that abuse was the issuance of over 15,000 passports by the administration before us without the country of birth seal. And that created an alarm in the international community because it was seen as an effort by the government to hide the true identity of those persons it was drawing to our CBI program. And the FinCEN advisory speak to that in detailed way, and I will advise for the interest of your listenership. In fact, it says in the ultimate paragraph, FinCEN notes that this advisory which they were warning international financial institutions to be aware of our program back then. That advice is intended to highlight the illicit finance risk posed by the St. Kitts Nevis Citizenship by Investment program. I think this is important, and this gives to light as to what was and what is. We have re-established confident relationship between the United States and Canada regarding our program, the EU, and we have hardly had anything of which we have not been able to deal with, but certainly we have no advisory. We must recall that we lost our visa-free access to Canada in November 2014, a similar indictment. So when they now say that the program is being abused, we know that it's political red herring, and the reality is far different. And in any event, too, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And what we do know, the very program that they have bashed this year will be bringing in the largest inflows of resources into the country, some $600+ million. That is remarkable. No abuse program could have sustained that level of input into the country. And so we are number one because of the reforms we did to the program, the credibility of our due diligence, the partnership with which we work with the United States, the EU, and all other international agencies, the multi-layered vetting system, the internal overhaul of our program through an international risk management firm, IPSA, and the recruitment of a CEO which comes with a background of experience in risk management. They have all helped to make our program number one, the platinum brand, number one in the efficiency of our due diligence, number one in terms of innovation, number one in terms of responsiveness. And that is really the evidence.
Dr. Harris, I want to pedal back a bit as it relates to the underselling of the passports, the underselling of citizenship. Now, there is a perception that the government had actually been complicit in the selling of citizenships under the minimum requirement as laid out in legislation.
And that is really a falsehood. The government itself is not a party to any sale. The government doesn't sell the CBI product. The government promotes it. Buyers basically engage in buying either the property in response to the real estate auction. And so you would go to, say, a D&, Daniel, or you would go to a Scott Gaines, or you would go to anyone, or the agents who are involved in that. The government has a price. No documents can come to the CBI unit, as far as I'm aware, and our research have indicated, that indicate that people are selling beyond the legal price.
So you are saying that while you were Prime Minister, you did not receive any information to prove that?
We have no evidence to basically prove that. What we do know, the government fees that are being predicated on the sale of the CBI products at a particular price have not changed. So if somebody were to go beyond or lower than what the government said, that information is not provided to us. And that person cannot come to the government and say, I sell for less, so I will pay less for my fees. In this market, as in other markets for products, you hear allegations, but they must be substantiated. And where they have been, anything published that indicates that an agent working on behalf of a developer or anyone had done so, we have in fact intervened, and we have in fact suspended a number of agents where there have been any evidence. The government is not a seller in the way we go and we say, we are selling you for that. What the government does is uphold the regulations, that whatever you do, these are the prices for our CBI program offerings, and once you comply with that, you show evidence. That is what the government goes by. The persons, as part of the competitive environment, who will setting one developer against another, one agent against another. But that has not been something that the government has either encouraged, facilitated, and where any scintilla of evidence has been provided. For example, somebody could say, well, this was basically promoted on such and such a date, and we find that because the agents responsible to be held account, we remove them because they have to be approved agents. So that is not something in any way which the government would be a party to or has been a party to.
Dr. Harris, I want to segue into the construction of the new prison. We know that that construction has been shrouded in controversy. We saw two members of your administration in the persons of the former Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Richards, and Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Mark Bradley, coming out and really laying some allegations against you in regard to the construction of this prison, had alleged at that time during the campaign that the prison had been approved to sell 5,000 passports at the cost of US $175,000 per passport, and that equals to 875 million US dollars for a prison that was expected to cost way less. Now, what is your response to these allegations?
Again, these are not allegations that anyone really takes seriously. What is the evidence?
But, it was taken seriously because this was a major talking point during the campaign.
But it was a major talking point. But the person who is serious would have asked, where is the evidence of corruption? The prison project came to the cabinet more than once. Every member present at the cabinet supported the project. The project, far from requiring any significant outflow from the government, provided an opportunity that is provided by law to the alternative investment option for the government to get those things that it considered important as part of the socio-economic agenda done to this particular approach to raising financing. So in the case of the prison was being built and is being built by a developer. It is not that the government is taking up its money to go and build the prison. The government spent money to get a design done by Stace Hobson and Associates, etc. Cost us millions of dollars. We then submitted that once we found a developer that had interest in it. And we said, listen, this is something of importance to us. And can you go to the marketplace, raise the financing needed to give us a modern prison? We are aware that 1840 had basically outlived its usefulness. Government was coming under pressure that it was not in keeping with a view of the human rights of the persons who were incarcerated, that it should be in these overcrowded facilities. And beyond that, we had our own view about rehabilitation, and we therefore need to ensure that the prison population could be rehabilitated and so they can become better citizens and residents of our country. In short, that particular option, and for that particular prison, the current Prime Minister has signed thousands, I repeat, thousands of citizenship to facilitate that. So if it was so bad, if it was so corrupt, if it was so illegal, and they had evidence, how could he justify? And you have him on record saying that the program will continue, but you cannot benefit from illegal proceeds. So if the proceeds of that operation, which is counting up to hundreds of millions of dollars coming into the country rather than going out, we are projected to get over $600 million. What is the largest product we have in the market? The alternative investment option to with the prison program. And the government that condemn it, all of that they are continuing. Almost every day he signs the CORs, as we call them, conscious then that there is nothing wrong. It was a political gimmick, unfortunately, believed by some. But he had no credibility. Had no credibility from start. And the proof of it is that they have now, having studied it, agreed that it will continue. So if it is wrong, why are they continuing something that is wrong? What have they done about it? Signed between August and now over 3,000 persons to become citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis under that program.
Dr. Harris, not to cut you off, but questions have also been raised about the legality of the alternate investment option. It has been suggested that when Cabinet approved that option, there was no mechanism under the law to allow for that to happen. And in fact, in May, an SRNO was issued and it was backdated. What are your views on that?
Well, again, I am no lawyer. Government was advised on the particular approach. The cabinet has a number of lawyers. There was no objection to this particular program. In fact, again, I think you have, where at one point, Jonel Powell sought to explain what the alternative investment project was about. There's nothing wrong with it. And again, it goes back. If it is wrong, why are they continuing it? You can't appropriate and reprobate. Why are you continuing something that of you has the certain view? Because anyone can make an allegation, however reckless it is, especially in the civil season. The season has now ended. The government has had the benefit of the in-house opinion, which our Attorney General would have relied upon in bringing certain proposals to the cabinet. And basically, he's our chief advisor. But if it's so fundamentally wrong, you must ask yourself, well, how they are continuing with an illegality. Does it make sense to reasonable people? Doesn't. That is not to say there may not be things that basically one may have an alternative view on. Almost every proposal, you could find somebody suggest, well, maybe we can do this at this time, or at a later date. But the program is being continued. Same way, that's not the only project we approve under it. We have a housing project in the Keon area that had been approved by Dean Daniel. Different in nature, yes, but it was under the alternative investment program where we felt that people who were not necessarily interested in the level of housing provided by NHC, for example, they want higher end homes, that they could be able to get houses at affordable homes through a similar program. Has that been wrong too? So again, people are cherry picking what suits them. And I've said we now have time. We have 100+ days. We have had legislation gone to the parliament. If this was so critical and so important, why has no legislation come in relation to this particular matter? And why have the project continued? You have heard it, and these are the hard questions, because the two don't add up. It was so bad. It was so corrupt. You have not a scintilla of evidence of any corrupt activity being provided. You have the government determining that it was in the national interest to continue the program. So they claim, and they have continued it. Nothing has changed.
Okay, Dr. Harris, I want to touch on PAP. We know that new administration is talking about reforming that program, the poverty alleviation program, that is. And we heard from the now Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, who really indicated that there was a need for the program to be reformed. We have heard that they are amending the PAP program. He also spoke to, irregularities within the program. He mentioned a number of civil servants whose salary was above the $3,000 mark, but they were beneficiaries of the program. He also spoke to duplicate names on the program. What are your thoughts on the reformation of that program?
The PAP was never a perfect program, and no program is. Recall in the elections, we said two things very clearly. We were going to increase the stipend provided on the PAP from $500 to $1,000 a month. And secondly, we will reform it. PAP was a program, work in progress, that the government always envisaged over time we would have to relook and analyze. Why did we need a PAP? We had said in the campaign of 2015 that the minimum wage was not a livable one and that we needed to intervene to ensure that people could live with dignity on their income. And we were aware, like most countries in the Caribbean, poverty is an important part of our reality. And the surveys that had been done had indicated that in 2014, around the year 2011, during that period, that you had significant levels of poverty and indigence in the context of St. Kitts in particular. So we came up with a program that if a person, it was predicated on the assumption that a household needed, at a minimum, around $3,000 to be able to live reasonably at that particular period of time. We went through a process, public registration of persons, etc., and we started perhaps with about 4,000 persons. By 2020, and you have to give the program a little while to capture how it is working, make the necessary adjustments, and we had intended to do so. The program was devised by the technicians within the Ministry of Social Development and Sustainable Development at the particular moment in time. And so by 2020, we basically had got into the COVID-19 pandemic. And it wasn't appropriate for us at that time to do any significant adjustment to the PAP program. So the PAP program would have continued as it was contemplated. With the COVID, we knew that thousands of persons, particularly in the tourism sector, had lost their jobs over a prolonged period of time, and therefore more persons were exposed. Indeed, in our budget up to 2021, we made explicit provision, and again for the budget for 2022, that we will have increased number of persons needing to go on the PAP program. In terms of the irregularities that I mentioned, these are things that are easily could be cured once they are found. As I said, it is not that the program will ever be without blemish, as any program of that nature. But is it so significant and widespread? And the answer is no. They take, for example, that there were duplicate names. Well, if there are duplicate names, how many persons are being duplicated? They haven't given you a figure because they are not about a search for truth. We hear that they perhaps had somewhere between 300 or so persons, civil servants who were over the threshold, who were part of it, and the response is that if you find things that are not in keeping with the proposal and the policy, you make the correction. You make the correction. That is what you do in all the programs. There is no need to say, well, listen, this program has to be stopped and everybody on this program are going to be tarnished. If you have a mechanism for identifying the breach in the control, you deal with those particular persons. I have no evidence, because that has not come to me, regarding duplication of names. They must say how many persons. They must say how many civil servants. I think it's some figure in a few hundred. But if you have a program with 7,000 people, as they have alleged, no evidence, but that is the figure they have, and you have 300 people, what percentage of that becomes of concern? because there will always be people who will attempt to basically succeed. And we hope that that will always be a small number. But are you going to disrupt something that is good, or you will make the necessary reforms? And that is why we had indicated in the campaign, we will reform the PEP. We were going to enhance it, and we were going to tighten some of the criteria regarding who would qualify for the PAC. You have to recognize, and I heard these foolish talk about, well, a number of family members. People have multiple families. And the truth is, the program always envisages that because that is the nature of society. You could have James Brown, who qualifies as a household. He's the brother of Thomas Mason, for example, and that person also qualifies. That is no problem for the program because the program says that the critical criteria is that the household income must not be more than $3,000. So anybody whose income on the face of it is less than 3,000 would qualify just on the basis of the evidence. And so some of the noise that is being made about the program to me is just raw politics. And that is why they must come with the full picture. Tell us how many civil servants, tell us how many duplicates. And we wonder, well, what is this noise about? Because if you know the persons who are on, who should be on, you deal with them. And you signal that. But the PAP is not something personal to anybody or any government. The fact that it's being continued indicates that it was a program well needed. Well needed. But it is not perfect, and it will never be perfect, because even as they are criticizing it, they have found other people in similar circumstance who satisfy their political preferences, and they have ensured that those persons become beneficiaries. So we are hearing a lot of noise, as if we are still in the silly season. What we need to get is hard evidence on which we can make sound decisions as a people so that we could move forward. We never profess that any of the programs that government has, that they are perfect. But what we do know, that there should be controls in place everywhere to minimize abuses. And so that is the response to the PAC. Well, while we are arguing about a man of poor family getting $500, we hear that the government is willing to forgive $130 million over at the Southeast Peninsula. That is a lot of money. The PAP program with all the 7,000 people would never come to that. Never come to that. So we are not going to justify any irregularity. We say in the normal function of a government or any entity, if there are irregularities, then you deal with them. PAP was a program to help the poor, to give them a better quality of life. The COVID-19 came, denied many people a chance to earn a living. Government, as part of the response, recognized that more persons then had to be supported, and the PAP was one mechanism, and the income support was another mechanism. And people have enough data, they have the policy prescriptions in relation to PAP to stop making unnecessary noise, loud noise, as if something so egregious had happened. The people getting some kind of money from PAP. How many people? And does it warrant the program to be stopped and have over 10,000 people come now and re-register? Or there can be some more efficient way in which any irregularity, if they are found, can be dealt with, and the program continues to do the good that it can do for the grandmother at home who had nothing to rely upon except for a pot, for the single mother-headed household who was relying on the pot to help her with her children. That is where we are. So we are coming out of a very difficult period of COVID, one of the worst pandemics in the last 100 years. And the government responded with compassion to that particular reality. The government itself has not turned a blind eye to any irregularity and will never. Because that's not what it was intended to do. But you have to review it. And even as you are reviewing it, you have to say, well, if 2018, when PAP started, the livable wage was $3,000, put $3,000 in 2022 satisfy the livable wage with all the movement in the cost of living. And then when you hear that somebody was getting $3,018, and you say, but is that something we are going to make a noise just over the threshold? Or you look at the particular circumstances that may require that, given whether the size of the family, given the fact that there is somebody there with disabilities, it would be a harsh application of the policy to deny that person. And what we needed to do as a policy was to basically increase the threshold. That has to be considered now, because what $3,000 could have done per month in 2018, it certainly will take a lot more to be able to do those things. And these are realities that we have to look at, not only bias, one-sided, partisan, political action, which the government seems to be obsessed about. We want a real policy. We need a proper overhaul of the program, the criteria, the adequacy of the thresholds that have been established years ago. Every day people are crying out for the cost of every food item, every educational input. So are we going to be locked into the $3,000 threshold? That is a matter for intelligent people to think through and to work out. But we will make no apologies for doing the very best we can to assist the ordinary people who are having difficulties of which we were aware. And we intervened with a meager amount of $500 to take them up to a livable wage. And we are happy that thousands of people were able to benefit and to do better with their lives, support their education and the orderly development of their children, the poor who were helped, the elderly, and all those people. We are happy for them, and we would want the program to continue. And we have no objection to the program being reformed, because in the campaign, we did say that. That was part of it. We know that once we had exited the pandemic, we will have to look at that program and look at all other programs. We introduced, for example, a fuel subsidy as part of the response for the COVID-19. That is something that, as we move out the shadows of COVID-19, any reasonable government will have to revisit. It just so happened that in the context of the cost of living, the fuel subsidy is something that needs to be increased, or else the busmen will be justified in going, taking action, because their businesses will not be profitable. But that has to be done in a managed way, and recognizing that in the society, and everywhere the advice has been, you can't withdraw your COVID-19 support too quickly until you're out of it or reasonably sure that you have extricated yourself from the pandemic, or else you are going to have a deeper scar from having done that, scarring people's lives, scarring the economy. But for me, most importantly, is what you do to people, their lives, their dignity, how they would live. And PAP was a response, a compassionate response, a well thought out response, and how our government responded to ensuring that all of our people, you look at the PAP allocations, whether you're in Basti, St. Paul, Sandy Point, Old Road, it doesn't matter, regardless of geography. You saw that persons were part of this program of assistance. The government I headed looked after everyone the best way we could at a particular moment in time.
Dr. Harris, in
Yes.
Parliament this past week, we heard from the current Attorney General of St. Kitts and Nevis, who said that your administration had been issuing contracts to your friends and family members by passing the mandatory legislative procurement process. Open Interactive, Inc., an IT company, was used as an example of those practices. What are your comments?
I think it's a very unfortunate statement made by the AG and the government, and it is also unfortunate that the AG or anyone should seek to cherry pick persons. They must then go through all the contracts, if they want to name and I suppose shame anybody. Go through all. Let us have a frank discussion of what happened. Again, the realities are quite different than the ones that they wish to make out. And I am not going to get in at this time to defend any particular contract which they bring unless they want to have a fair discussion. You can't choose because the government in the course of its life would have given many contracts. So how come only one they could bring to the fore and tarnish the good name of an individual and his particular entity? And the politics of it is real clear. When the particular entity was offered the contract, came with recommendations, it went through the appropriate processes that were available at the moment in time. And it was, in fact, went through not only technical scrutiny, but legal scrutiny. At the particular moment, the Attorney General had responsibility for ICT. So I'm not going to dwell in that because I think it's unfair and unhelpful. To pick one person, if you say that this was something was prevalent, then put all of them before the body of the public. I find it unfairly tarnishing, unjustifiably so, the good name and the good work of one of our citizens. And I will not add to that by getting into the particulars of this case. This is part of the noise. This is part of the deliberate politicking, which tells me the government is not serious about good governance. Because how could it be right and fair and justifiable that you single out one individual, alleging there are many, but you single out one person and, as it were, attempting to make them the laughing stock? I am not going to get in that game. And I think thinking people in the society, people who are concerned about good governance, would say that is not fair. And so I don't want to continue to pursue that unfairness. The Procurement Act was an act that we attempted to operationalize at some particular point in our term. But even without the Procurement Act, there were well-established mechanisms for selecting service providers, and the government followed those. The Public Works, for example, was the critical agency of the government that would have dealt with the award of contracts, especially when it comes to physical works, and it was tender. More than one person had to tender to do any particular project. All the persons who had put forward the tenders have an opportunity, as far as the process goes, to hear what their competitors would have put. And so even before we know, the particular people know who is leading and who is behind, at least in terms of what they would have quoted to the Public Works, which had been a central engine. We are not hearing the full truth. What we are hearing is persons with political bias and with political agenda trying to exploit the lack of knowledge of some persons regarding how government works. And again, what have they done differently? Because they have awarded contracts since they have gone there. Would they be bold enough to say whether they have followed the criteria? They have followed the rules of the procurement. We haven't heard that. We haven't heard that. So what political games they are playing, we must be careful to tell them we are not going to be part of it.
I want to congratulate you on your recent anniversary as an elected member of parliament. Now, we know that you are a veteran in terms of the political arena in St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to ask you for your thoughts on the recent elections. What do you think were the reasons why your party was not successful at the polls?
Well, I would say that I have heard analyses that have come from political pundits and persons seasoned in it. There are some, I believe, persuasive arguments being put. I think that one of the factors that mitigated against us, we had a very short window, while others were scheming about general elections and certainly had put plan in place to force a general election dissolving the unity outfit. We certainly were concerned with governance. My priority from 2000, and we had the last general election before 2022, in 2020. But what had we been battling with? Saving people's lives and livelihoods. That, and we succeeded at that. You look at the PAHO reports where you live here. We did better than most countries. When countries' fiscal house was so poorly outfitted that they had to go and beg and borrow to respond to the COVID-19, we were able to go to our strong buffer and take over $200 million to deal with our response to COVID and provided the most comprehensive response to get our people and our economy back to work again. So that had been my focus. And so it really was a disappointment that there were persons within who didn't have the luxury really of taking on the onerous challenge of leadership and to look at the critical state of the COVID-19 pandemic and to come up with solutions to get us there. They were involved more with party politics and attempting to see ways in which they could force an election on the country, which they succeeded in doing. And so we had that distraction within the government itself, which has proven to be unhelpful and have given us, as it were, allow us to go back to what the people rejected in 2015. But, sorry, you go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what is the future? What is your projections for the future of the People's Labour Party? You know, this was the first time you contested the elections on your own with a full slate of candidates. So going forward, what can we expect?
Well, we can expect that the People's Labour Party will be alive and well again when you listen to the external unbiased views of people. It has been a very good performance. Admittedly, it's not the performance that we would like, but we was the youngest, the newest of all political parties, and we basically amassed the second largest number of votes in the country, outdoing what parties who have been in the political sphere were able to do. And so that in itself is a record. We were able across the country in a very restricted period of time to field candidates and to contest a general elections that was precipitated by those with nefarious agendas. And in the end, the outcome was not one that we would have liked. We have an opportunity to rebuild, and certainly from all the reports again from the experts are those experienced. The People's Labour Party will be a viable alternative to the government and has a strong future ahead. Of course, we cannot take anything for granted, and there is a lot of work to be done. But I'm certain that we can certainly do this. When we formed the People's Labour Party a few years back, there were a lot of doubting Thomases. And we contested at the time 2 seats. We returned one of them in our second going. That's in 2015. In 2020, as the second option, we were able to increase our seat count from 1 to 2. And of course, had things been different, we would have been a party in the government. So we work with what we have now, and we have to rebuild, and we will rebuild stronger. I will lend my successful experience over the last, 29 years to assist the party, but beyond the party, to assist the country in finding real democracy and in finding a space in which we all can operate in a St.Kitts of Nevis, which we all know is our home. And some of the dirty politics that had been played in the run-up to the 2022 elections, that those things would be minimized as we move forward. Because for some of us, all we have is St. Kitts and Nevis. And we have to build it and build it strong and make it inclusive. And I have the honor of leading perhaps the most inclusive government, a government that comprises at least 3 political parties. And therefore, we had always to be conscious of that dynamics. That is why those from Nevis could have said that they had their best arrangement ever in the history of the country of St. Kitts and Nevis. That is why those from the other political party found themselves in position of decision making at all levels of the government. The team unity construct has been the best construct that has come forward to the country. And we cannot gainsay the power of unity. It is this unity within the team unity which helped to precipitate the fall of the government and the best political arrangement which St. Kitts and Nevis has had. It is no accident that the 7 years of a team unity government has been the best 7 years for the country, the best 7 years for the people receiving their direct benefit, whether you are a sugar worker, whether you lost your house as a result of a hurricane, whether you are a poor mother without help and the PAP became your life support. I mean, there's so many things about which we can be proud. Look at the way we transform our infrastructure, an island main road being done, the bus terminals that we have in downtown and at the East End, Wellington Road, and so on, the way in which we were progressing. We were the envy of the rest of the region. Performance at its best. And we were able to do this without being reckless. We didn't have to run to the IMF. In fact, we succeeded in paying out the IMF. We didn't have need to go for a land for debt swap arrangement. In fact, we succeeded in paying over about $500 million to release the lands and put them to good use around the country so that homes could be built, so that community centers could be put down. And as I say community centers, I recall that at the Utleys Lodge area, that was land that we redeemed and put to proper use for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, farmers, and other people who wanted land. So I am very satisfied about what we had been able to accomplish as a government. And yes, I regret that the people were not able to realize all the fruits, all the promises that the unity arrangement offered to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Dr. Harris, we don't get to speak to you quite often. So one of the questions that has been on the minds of many following the election is your future in politics in St. Kitts and Nevis. What can we expect? Do you intend to contest another general elections?
Well, the future is still to be determined. What I would say honestly, I am aware that I've had perhaps one of the most successful political careers. I have started 29 years ago, did 8 federal battles in terms of general election, won every one of them, thanks to God and the loving people of number 7, and the people of the country generally. I was able to do what perhaps no other politician had been able to do. I ran with one party. When that became unworkable for a number of us, I exited. I formed a new party, was able still to win my seat, and basically in every election, whatever the dynamics, whether I was contesting as unity against Labour, Labour against PAM as in the initial years up until 2015, or it was in this last election in a three-way contest where I was running against Labour, running against PAM in the general election, still succeeded. Some 54% of the voters expressed their confidence in me. And the second closest to me was some 36, 37%. That is a big margin in the context of the race that we ran. So I feel very confident that I have had a good run, and I now channel my energies to see how could I be of service to the country, because this is a place that I have loved, this is a place that I've committed all of my years of public service to, and the country has been good to me. And of course, for my party to see how one can use this time to assist in its restructuring and its further build out. I think that is as much as one can say. The dynamics of life are such that we take things one day at a time, trusting God and have confidence in the people. And at the appropriate time, perhaps, when there will be a need for further clarity, I'm sure that I will make sure you will be the first that I will call.
I'll hold you to that.
And to give you an exclusive in relation to this particular matter.